Yum, yum!
Okay, let's talk a little bit about materials. In Modo, you're of course using the shader tree. The shader tree is a unique thing in 3D programs. It just gives great insight and just at a glance, it takes up very little room and great insight into all the different materials in your scene. They're just human readable. It's not a bunch of colored shader balls in your face. And what's really unique about Modo, it's got a sort of scene-wide evaluation in terms of how these materials are applied to the scene. So you can very easily have like one stainless steel material, a whole bunch of objects in the scene with the exact same, a shared stainless steel polygon selection set tag. And that gets pointed to that group in the shader tree. And you can quickly apply, these materials across different objects in the scene really efficiently. So coming into Cinema 4D, I was worried I was going to lose some of that flexibility and efficiency. And really, aside from Cinema 4D not, being more traditional and not having the full scene evaluation of just individual materials, you can quickly not just apply materials to objects, which quite frankly, when you're dealing with CAD items, most pieces of geometry are just going to be like one full stainless steel piece of geometry, one full like black plastic piece of geometry. Typically, like each piece of geometry is just one kind of material. But you want to have the flexibility of mixing materials onto different polygon sets on one piece of geometry, especially if you optimize your scene and take a lot of different mesh items or objects and crunch them down and merge them into one, right? And Cinema 4D actually has a system that's very similar to Modo. The workflow is different, but conceptually it's very similar. It's just a little bit of difference in terms of the scene-wide evaluation. And so I'm going to do my best to sort of show you the differences between these two things. Of course, both programs have decent like built-in presets. I don't think that's super relevant if you're doing product and a product rendering and animation. You're going to be creating your own presets and your own materials on a per project basis. Cinema 4D has access to a lot more third-party materials. Of course, you have all the grayscale Gorilla materials, but there's a ton of like Octane and Redshift material sets available on Gumroad and other places. And so if you're into that, Cinema 4D has a ton of it. They both have good preset managers, and you can save these presets with scenes and archive, in different places and archive them. And so that's important again when coming back to projects. A couple years later, you want to make sure your presets that you made specifically for that project are available and not, on some hard drive you got rid of 4 years ago. So we'll talk about all this stuff and I'll try to go through it fairly quickly. This is probably the most involved section. Okay, just a quick recap of how we apply materials to entire meshes in Modo, just so we can compare that to Cinema 4D. And then more importantly, how we apply materials to just selections of polygons. We call those polygon selection sets, or there's what we call a P tag in Modo, or a polygon tag. Cinema 4D, it's also called a tag or a polygon selection tag. And the workflow is a little bit different, but it's pretty similar. Just the layout of the interface really is different. And then Modo has a different way of organizing those tags in the scene versus Cinema 4D. But just right off the bat, in Modo, if we want to apply material to an entire mesh, we can just right click and do what we call an item mask that shows up in the shader tree. The name of the item mask corresponds with the item name. It's super easy to keep track of, and we can just change the material there. Or if you're a real glutton for punishment, you could pop open Modo's material preset browser and grab a material that I made all of these for Luxology probably in 2012. They're all outdated. They're completely useless. But if you're crazy, you can just drag one of those in here as well, and we can get this red material on here. And you can watch as the advanced viewport takes like 3 seconds to make it show up. So the preset workflow in Modo is complete trash. It's actually really good in Cinema 4D. But the item, basically, if you can do multiple items at the same time, and Modo multiple item masks, create multiple ones at the same time, and then you can just go in here and do whatever. Like, there we go. We've got 3 different item masks, 3 different materials on these items. Here we are in Cinema 4D. It's very similar. We've got a material tab. We have a whole bunch of presets that come with it that are actually useful. So you can load up a preset if you want, like. You just right click and load it in the scene. And then, as you might guess, you just drag and drop, right? So if I drag this on here, I'm going to get this material right here. And the way it works is you see the material in the object manager here, right? In the same sort of layout, in the same row as the mesh. And this material is just, this little material ball is just referencing this one in the scene. And so for instance, if I drag this to another piece, it's going to also get that little ball here. But it's not two different materials. They both reference the same material. So if I change this, make it green, they both turn green, right? Pretty easy. I can also hold control and drag and duplicate that material. And if I want to change this one to green, I can apply it to the same mesh here. And you'll see that it shows up just to the right of the original one. Now this is sort of like the shader tree having materials stacked one on top of the other. And while the shader tree is evaluated from the bottom up, so if I come down, or if I go right here, right, to the cover, and I have another material on top of this, and it's, sort of yellow, right? When Modo is evaluating, it's coming up the shader tree. It first sees this one, it's pink, and if there's one above it, it's yellow, then that's what you get. You get the one above it. Cinema 4D is like that, except it's left to right. So I can, unfortunately, I don't know how to right-click and disable this. That may not be possible. If you know the answer to that, please put it in the comments. But if I, for instance, delete that, you'll see red's still there. Or if I take red and drag it to the right, it'd just be like dragging a material in Modo above the one below it, and that's how it works, right? Left to right. So really straightforward. Okay, so let's look at polygon selection sets, or polygon tags. We call them P tags in Modo. They call them just polygon selection tags in Cinema 4D. And there's 3 different types of P tags in Modo, right? If you look here, we've got material, part, selection set. I guess we have 4 smoothing groups as well. So these are all just different ways to tag polygons as a group. And when we do texturing, we do material P tags typically, right? So I can grab, some polygons here, and I press M, and I'm going to call this red, and I can assign a color to it, and hit OK. And what it does is it creates a P tag called red. You can see it here. You can see it right here, and it assigns this material to it. So when the shader tree starts evaluating, it just starts at the bottom and it moves. Let me just close these, and it moves upwards, and it sees the red one, and it just renders it right there. And so if we have another one, we'll just grab some of these. We're going to take some of those red ones, and I'm going to press M, and I'm going to say green, and this is going to be a green material P tag. There we go. There's green. Now, what you'll notice is these polygons can only have one material P tag. It's either red or green. Can't be both, right? It's just red or green. Cinema 4D does not work like that. Cinema 4D works like Modo's selection set P tags. So if I go over here and I grab some polygons and I add a selection set right over here, new set, and call this one blue, hit OK. Now you'll notice it doesn't show up in the shader tree here, but it does show up down here in our stats list. And I can add it to the shader tree. I can just add a group, and I can point it to, instead of a material P tag, a selection set P tag. Throw a material in there. Blue. There we go. It's called blue. And then I can just, now it's blue. And there it is. And now if I make another one, I'm just going to overlap these like I did last time with these. And I'm going to call this one, we'll do a new set, and we'll call this pink, like that. Again, you're going to see it down here in stats. There's one called pink. And if I add a new group here, and I, again, set it to a selection set, and set it to pink, and then add a material, and just sort of make it pink, it colors those pink. But the difference is, if I hide it, those blue ones are still there. These polygons that are overlapped retain both pink and blue selection set tags. So when the polygons are sharing P tags, right, both pink and blue, whoever's on top is going to, show up in the render. So if blue is on top of the shader tree, it's going to get, those polygons are going to get the blue tag. If pink is on top, it's evaluated last, and those polygons are going to get the pink tag. That's much more akin to how Cinema 4D works. Okay, so the big difference is Modo has what's called like sort of a global polygon tag system. So over here, I've got, we've got, red and green and pink and blue. If I go down here, if I just select some of these guys and assign, let's say, green to it like that. So it gets green, and I can see that they have this green P tag in just the same place. I can just select them both here, right? So even though there's two different meshes, there's just really one set. They share this set, right? So it's sort of a shared p tag. In Cinema 4D, as far as I can tell, it doesn't share p tags. You have to create new ones on a sort of per object basis. So let's go over to Cinema 4D. Got the same thing going on here. Let's just come in close and let's bring up some wireframe here. And so there's two ways to do this. Well, there's probably more than two ways to do it, but let me just do a manual sort of roundabout way first so you can understand how this works, and then I'll do a faster way. So I'm just going to right click on here and I'm going to go under other tags, and you see Polygon selection. That's just like in Modo how I created a selection set, except I'm creating the set first and then I'm going to add polygons to it versus selecting polygons and then creating the set and naming it. So we'll do this. You'll see this little triangle here. It says polygon selection. It's got a count of 0. So this is my p tag, right? My polygon selection tag. And let me just grab some polygons, right? I'll just grab these guys here. And then I'm going to come to my p tag and I'm going to update it. Now there's 97 of them in there, all right? And we'll also call this p tag green, right? And so I've got a green material here, and I can, if I drag it this way, remember it's going to cover up everything. But you'll notice it's got this little slot here for selection, and that's where it's going to look for a p tag. And so I can either type green here, or I could just grab this guy and drag it in. And there, now this material is limited to this p tag. Now the only sort of thing I don't like is I don't have some global list of all these. I've got, these little triangles here, which tells me there's p tags and they have names. I've got these little circles, spheres here that tell me they're referencing a p tag. And I have to click it to find out, oh, okay, it's this one, right? And I can, select the polygons here and go to polygon mode, and I can go to the p tag and I should be able to select the polygons. Can I select the polygons? Am I going to object mode and then polygon mode, and then yes, we can actually go to the p tag now and select the polygon. So it's kind of like Modo's stats list. But if I do another set, let's do it this way. I'm going to actually control drag that green one and let's make it like purple or something. And so this is the same thing I'm doing in Modo, where I'm going to overlap some of these guys. And instead of right clicking and creating a p tag and then adding these polygons to it and then referencing it, I'm just going to drag and drop. I'm just going to drag and drop this purple sphere onto these selected polygons, and you'll see what happens. It's smart enough to create its own p tag, and this one is referencing it. So I would actually go in and then name this like purple, because I want to know what the hell I did when I look at this a week from now. But you'll notice that this will have to update. We'll call this purple. Surprised I didn't update automatically, actually. But there you go, right? So we've got, again, and then in terms of the shared ones, and one thing you might want to do to organize your scene is just put the p tag that this is associated with right to the left of it or the right of it. And that way you know that this is associated with that and this is associated with that. That seems like maybe a good way to organize it. And again, if I take these two and look right here, if I move them to the right, it's going to get evaluated last, and it's going to get priority over the purple there. So, it works similar to Modo. I think I kind of prefer Modo's, stats list and being able to. One of the things I like to do in Modo, when I'm doing a big CAD file, is I like to just select all the items. And so I've got, 36 items selected, and I can look at all the p tags on all the items at once. And so these are all dark colored, dark goldenrod and emerald and lavender blue. These are all colors that came in with the CAD file, not colors, but p tags, material select, polygon selection sets. And typically when I'm doing big, complex CAD files, I like to look at all these. And if I see anything like, pastel purple that I didn't make, I know I missed it and I need to go in there and, and fix it, right? So all these are pastel purple for some reason. But yeah, in Cinema 4D, I'm not sure how you would do that. So the likely workflow, if you're trying to add materials to polygons, you're probably going to have numerous materials in your sort of material bin over here. And then you're going to, come over here and select the polygons that you want those materials on. and just drag it on there. It's going to automatically create the set. You're going to want to rename the set. You know, I wish you could do it at the same time. I don't think you can. So I like to have descriptive names like, bright orange or whatever. And it seems like I'm going to have to copy and paste that. But still, it's a decent workflow. And it's similar enough to Modo. You should pick it up pretty quickly. Okay, let's talk about rendering now. So it was really important to me that whatever program I chose had good Octane support. That's what I've been using for the last 10 years or so with all of my product renderings, animations, and Modo. I know Octane. I understand it. I want my clients' renders to look the same or similar, especially if I'm redoing product family renders. They need to look the same. And while path tracers, it's not like the old days where you could look at a render and go, that was Lightwave, and that render is V-Ray, and that one is 3D Studio Max. Path tracers do kind of look the same, right? Which is a good thing. You could jump between them. And Cinema 4D comes with Redshift built in. They acquired Redshift as sort of their default renderer now. You can also get V-Ray if you're a big V-Ray user. For Cinema 4D, it's still available. There was a lot of really active V-Ray users for Modo. And of course, that's not available anymore. But so you've got V-Ray, you've got Redshift, and of course you have Octane. And I'm so happy to say the Octane integration in Cinema 4D is fantastic. It's regarded as the best Octane integration. The one in Modo is actually really good too. And they're very similar. You can watch a training for Octane in Cinema 4D and use it for Modo, or you can watch one of my Modo Octane videos and use it for Cinema 4D as well. And they operate very much the same way. So I'm really happy about that. And of course you have cloud support. You can go to Otoy's Render Cloud straight from Cinema 4D, or if you're like me, you can export an ORBX file just like you would at a Modo, test it in the Octane standalone program, and then send it up to the cloud for rendering. It's really important to have cloud rendering support, in my opinion. I believe the Render Cloud also supports V-Ray for Cinema 4D now, and I think you can actually load up just Cinema 4D files straight into the Render Cloud, Otoy's Render Cloud as well. So that's pretty huge. So I'm thrilled with this portion of it because you're not losing anything from Modo here. In fact, you're gaining some things. It's just a nicer integration. But we'll just take a quick look at this and mostly about the similarities, so you'll feel comfortable going from Modo to Cinema 4D in terms of the Octane rendering. By the way, let me just go over here real quick. If you look at the Cinema 4D channel on the Pixel Fondue Discord right here, and so we've got our chat channel here, but I've been accumulating training YouTube channels here and for Cinema 4D in the Pixel Fondue Discord. And so, Silverwing has the best Octane videos of anybody on the internet, in my opinion. There's some other guys here that do good Octane videos and just good, training all around. This guy, EJ Hassenfratz, I've done some of his training. He's really good. He's a really professional. I think he does a lot of Octane, or not Octane's, Maxon's official training as well, but he's got a whole YouTube channel. There's just a bunch, and they're all designers, so all their stuff just looks really good. It's looks way better than mine. So there's tons of good training. There's tons of good training in Cinema 4D, and we're accumulating this here. By the way, if you're watching this, if you're a Cinema 4D user, or you're one of these trainers, join the Pixel Fondue Discord, jump into our chat. There's only a handful of us here that have used C4D and Modo that are really on here, are able to answer questions and things like that. So anyway, that's rendering. Let's take a look at these features really quick just to see how similar they are. All right, let's just do a quick Octane recap. In Modo, Octane is quite well integrated. It uses the shader tree for material assignment, and then you use Octane nodes in the schematic to, wire up your Octane materials. So if I want to, pop up one, do a sort of side-by-side here with OpenGL over here, so I can move my camera around and Octane on the right, and I fire up Octane. Then I just take a look at my cover here. What I can do is maybe do some basic material settings in Modo, like make that transparent, whatever, something like that. And then typically what you're going to do in Modo is you have your list of Octane commands here and Octane nodes. I'm going to add an override that basically takes whatever's in the shader tree to a limited degree and converts it to a schematic, which you can then look at in the schematic like this, boom, or an assembly, I guess you would say. And then you can look at it in the schematic. And then I can go in here and say, let's say I want to add a medium or something like that. I can just, where's the medium? Right there. And I go over to my nodes here and I say new medium. And I just, add an absorption medium and make this, sort of purple and up the density or something like that to 500, and there we go. Right, and you've got if you used Octane and Modo, you know how this works. You've got your sort of toolbar down here, which is very similar to Octane standalone, and you've got all your textures and things like that over here. We've got different displacement nodes and texture nodes and everything like that. Now this isn't so great because it's not like searchable, and it's it has some limitations, and you have to do these overrides. You don't have to do any of that stuff in Cinema 4D. In Cinema 4D, I'll just pop it over here. I can do something very similar where I can come over and go over to the renders, and we'll set the renderer to Octane like this. Now, there is one very specific thing. Whoops, did I do that right? Yeah, Octane render. There's one very specific thing you have to do, and I thank Silverwing for this. Silverwing is the best Octane tutorials on the internet, by the way, on YouTube. But you want to make sure over here in scene settings, under color management, at some point in Cinema 4D, after they've incorporated Redshift, they made the default color space ACES CG. Now, apparently that works well with Redshift. It is more advanced color space and more modern than just the old sRGB workflow, but Octane is working with sRGB. And so you want to make sure your render space is sRGB. So I have that set to, here's the different spaces you have. These are different presets. What I did is I went in here and I picked the sRGB one and made it the default. If you are working with Octane and ACES CG, the colors are not going to look right. So I want to change the space, not from ACES CG, but legacy sRGB like that. Okay. And you can make it default like that. So every time you open it, it always goes to sRGB. Okay, so then I can just pop open an Octane window, just kind of like I would in Modo, and I can, just make them side by side. I've got materials here and OpenGL over here. Now in Octane for Cinema 4D is a little bit different. Where in Modo, if you have like a light or like a mesh or something, it's going to contain sort of Octane information that's attached to it in a different tab. In Octane in Cinema 4D, I would typically like to just add an Octane camera. I'll add it right up here like this. I can also add like an HDRI environment. So objects, Octane HDRI environment. You can actually do a texture environment like that. It's got a place for a texture right there. And so I can go in and throw in an HDR, let's say, for instance, from my Cinema 4D assets. So we'll just do like a studio. Now let's do like an interior HDR like this one. I can throw this over here like that. And I can start a render up. And it's going to seem super familiar to you. So one of the things that Cinema 4D does, which I have not gotten used to, is it likes to render from your sort of default perspective view. I can see there are times when that's going to be useful, but you like to switch to the Octane camera here. I'm also going to add, this is something else I like in Cinema 4D, is it has this really nice backdrop item. So I can add a backdrop here. And we just switch to the default camera, and you can see this backdrop right there, right? Sweet. And it's procedural. You can change it over here. We should have made one of these for Modo. Just go back to the Octane camera like this. And actually, let me just move that backdrop down just a tad. Like that. Yeah, you can add lights here if you want, and you can also add materials from over here. So I want to add an Octane specular material like this, and I can drag it either right into the Octane viewport or over here, and I can just drag it there. And now we've got this specular material on our cover. Now, there's a couple of things which I do not like about this. For one, you see how this is all black in there? It's defaulting to direct lighting, which is sort of a faster ray tracing than path tracing, which made sense 10 years ago, but I have why would you default to this in 2025 and not path tracing? I mean, I think we all have GPUs that can handle path tracing now. Don't make me do this every time. So I don't know who's responsible for this plugin, but I'm going to find you and I'm going to make some requests. The other request I'm going to have is, why are we at 16,000 default samples? Again, that was Octane circa 2015 or something. We have that was pre-denoising, so we have denoising now. Like 1,000 is probably more likely something we're going to start with. And then you can come over here to like, the Octane camera. And again, this is just things being in slightly different places. So we can go over here to the camera and we can get to our Octane camera over here. We can look at our imager and it can enable the imager, and we can turn on the denoiser, and you'll see the denoise pass down here, just like it is in standalone. And things like that, like we go to post-processing and enable that, and do things like add bloom or whatever we want to do. So things are all there. They're just in slightly different places. I can come over here and let's just say let's just create a new material. Let's create like a metallic material and apply it to the bottom. And we can adjust our metallic material either just on these tabs here, or if you want to start rigging things up in the node editor, we can pop open the node editor. And this is going to be just really similar to the schematic in Modo. You can, it's very similar, right? So we've got some properties over here, and we've got, this sort of auto hides, but we've got some, all our nodes over here, right? And so if we want to, we can also get to nodes by like, we can sort of drag out. This is our specular material. Let's go to our metallic material, and let's drag out the specular color here. If we just sort of let go, it'll bring up a node. We could do search for nodes here. I could just add an RGB node. I can, if I want to change, the color of this, I can go like that and change the sort of metal color, whatever we want to do here. Do something like this, or change the roughness, whatever we want to do, right? Make it very rough or not. Now we can dock this as well. We can take this and just, dock it here. And again, this looks a little crowded because I'm recording at 1080 resolution. But, we can use we have our focal length picker here, our material picker if we want to go back to the specular material. And let's say I want to add a medium. I could just drag out. It's, I've got a smart search here. It's only going to show me the different medium nodes that would attach to this. So I don't have to dig through a huge list. I can get an absorption medium, and again, I can just take the absorption color, drag out, grab an RGB color, maybe go sort of like reddish or something, and then I'd want to change the density amount. And again, I'm sort of crushing my space here because I'm recording at 1080, but normally you would have plenty of room and large monitors. I could also adjust these over here in the main property editor in Cinema 4D. I can just have a medium node, and I can sort of twirl down and up the density there. But it's a little bit nicer than Modo, and it's super, like these all work exactly the same. And, the layout's a little bit different, and, there's a couple of quibbles I have with, the type of ray tracing or path tracing you're doing, and the number of samples, and there'll be some other things I'm probably going to complain about. But overall, it was just really easy for me to jump into Cinema 4D and start using Octane because it works almost exactly like it works in Modo. Some of the buttons are a little bit different, and the positions and layouts are a little bit different, but it's just, you can pick it up in a day, less than a day, a couple hours. It's super easy. Okay, let's talk a little bit about some of these other things. I think I'm just going to gloss over them because this video is pretty long, and I'll just do a future video covering these other items. Modeling, listen, you're not going to replace Modo's modeling with Cinema 4D. Cinema 4D is capable. The tools are familiar. They've got, the same sort of selections, and they're not as fluid as Modo, but you can double click an edge loop. You can, you can bevel and extrude and bridge and edge slide and all that stuff. It's all there. It's just not, you're not going to get in the flow state like you can in Modo. Modo's like really unparalleled in modeling. But if you need to like model a tube or something like that, or fix a CAD, fix a part from the CAD file, or just whip up something quickly, you can do it in Cinema 4D, but you're not going to switch to Cinema 4D for modeling. I think you're just going to use Modo until it no longer works. Or maybe choose a program like Blender, which did a better job stealing from Modo than Cinema 4D did. So simulation, though, is a completely different world. Simulation in Modo was almost non-existent. It was basically like 2010 era bullet physics or something. In Cinema 4D, simulation is fantastic. You've got integrated particle and rigid body and soft body, cloth, fluid. You've got sort of volume physics, which is flames and smoke, and the systems are all integrated. They can work with each other, which is really cool. Now, is it like Houdini level? No, of course not. But you're not doing Houdini level. You're not going to Cinema 4D to do Houdini level simulations. Like if your job is simulations, you're going to use Houdini. But if you do product animations, you need to do like a quick fluid simulation or some particle simulations or a little cloth simulation. All those tools are there and they work. They're really pretty easy to use. You're just using the tag system and caching it, just like, it's all really straightforward. And I will definitely be doing some simulation tutorials, but simulations are a huge win. If you're moving from Modo to Cinema 4D, you're going to have a bunch of tools at your disposal that you just really envied over, like, as a Modo user. And I think they've done a really good job updating these tools in Cinema 4D. In the last few releases, they've put a lot of emphasis on these, and they're using motion graphics all the time, of course, which is probably one of the reasons they did it. But they're useful for product animation. Rigging, I have not touched on in Cinema 4D. I've seen some really nice Cinema 4D animations, including character animations. I think the rigging tools are probably really capable. In Modo, the rigging tools are actually fantastic. They have an order of operations sort of format in Modo. They were super flexible. They were also super slow, like your scene would bog down really quickly with the evaluation engine. Cinema 4D seems to be much faster in this regard. So again, I'm going to be looking at the rigging. And it's one of the things I wish I had time to do before this video because it is really important. But my feeling is that the tools are there in Cinema 4D to do rigging. And it's something I'll be taking a look at and sharing on the Pixel Fondue channel. Animation, they're both similar. They're both really capable. They're both, they have a nice, smooth timeline. Cinema 4D is going to look a lot like Modo, where you can pop this up. You have a dope sheet, you have a graph view, that kind of thing. It's very similar to Modo. The workflow is a little different. The keyboard shortcuts are a little different, but you're gonna feel pretty much at home in animating in Cinema 4D as you would in Modo. Also, of course, Cinema 4D is just faster. It's gonna work faster. Modo had a hard time playing back animation at full frame rate with a lot of stuff in the scene. Cinema 4D is just a faster program, so that's really nice. So I'm going to try to touch on this stuff in future videos, but that's the TLDR on those. Okay, let's talk a little bit about cost, because this is a part where I see a fair amount of criticism lobbed at Maxon for the cost of Cinema 4D. And, we live in a 3D world where you can't ignore the force of Blender. Blender is not only free, it's good. It's a capable program. It's a very capable program with a very large, very enthusiastic community. And it puts a lot of pressure on these other companies that offer subscriptions, right? And so I think this was part of Modo's downfall. They didn't have an indie program, Modo. It used to have one, but they abandoned it for some reason. And it didn't have a free version. It just had subscription, so no perpetual. The subscription price for Modo was very high, in my opinion. And eventually, I think, people just stopped buying it. Even though it was a capable program and it had a really strong community, it could never reach new users, because a new user is not going to do a 2-week trial. They're just going to download Blender and go online to the massive Blender universe of tutorials and learn how to do it, right? And so if you look at what Cinema 4D is doing, they've got, they're a little bit like Foundry. They position this as a professional tool, subscription only. So this is aimed at people who are making money with 3D. So either small companies, some large companies even, and individuals who are making money with their 3D program. Because if you're not making money, $100 a month is a lot, right? If you're not making money, $69 a month is a lot. Now, one of the things I liked about Maxon is they did bolster their offerings with some acquisitions. They acquired Red Giant, and so they got some nice plugins there that I've used for years in After Effects. And they acquired Redshift, a fantastic renderer. They acquired Universe, more plugins for After Effects, so they know their sort of like design niche that they're dealing with. And they also acquired ZBrush, right? And so they've got all these different costs per month. And Maxon 1, you sort of get everything, 105 bucks a month. So that's like, what, 1,200 bucks a year? So if you're making money with your 3D program, 1,200 bucks a year, it's not a lot, or 69 bucks a month, just like for Cinema 4D. So 69 bucks a month, it's like, $2 a day, a little over $2 a day. I go to Starbucks pretty much every day, or some coffee shop on the way to the gym or something. I grab a coffee. Even the small ones, at least in Silicon Valley here, are like $3.50 for like a tall, or small Starbucks coffee. So, in a month, that's like 90 bucks for Starbucks, right? And if you look at Cinema 4D, 105 bucks, for everything, or 69 bucks for just Cinema 4D. Like, that's just not a lot if you're making money. And I understand what they're doing. They've positioned themselves here purposefully. And, it's just not a significant cost if you've got clients and you're doing, you have a small company or an individual and you've got a consistent business. It's not a big deal. Get this, get Octane, get Adobe, one of the Adobe subscriptions. So you get, Photoshop, Premiere, After Effects, and you've got a really good set of tools there to do this kind of product work, right? The animations and stills, and you're fine. If you're a hobbyist or somebody just getting their feet wet or something like that, this is a pretty tough sell with the other stuff that's out there. Not just with Blender, but there's an indie version, of course, of Houdini for like 200 bucks, right? And I think even Maya has an indie version for like 200 bucks a year or something like that. So, this is where Cinema 4D is. My concern jumping into Cinema 4D a little bit. They have a vaster user base, a much vaster user base than Modo did. They have a company. Now I see a lot of course, everybody complains about everything. I was one of those guys with Modo. People, again, levy criticism at Maxon for not being, necessarily engaged with users who don't have 100 bucks a month to spend on this, or not reaching out to new users. And I think it's a somewhat legitimate criticism, like not having a plan for indies or new users. Because for Cinema 4D to continue to do well, they need to attract new people to the program. 3D is hard to learn. We have Gen AI now, which is basically free for everybody to use, and it's a sort of a shortcut to getting a lot of images that you would normally create with a 3D program. And so where is Maxon 5 years from now without an indie offering or some sort of free offering that's maybe feature limited or something along those lines to attract new users? I don't know. This could be a problem that starts to manifest over the next few years. And it does make me a little bit nervous. I will say, if you are a professional making money and you have consistent clients and consistent work, these prices are totally reasonable. This is not a big deal. Like I said, I spend more on coffee every month than I do on these tools that make me a lot of money. So that's my general opinion on this. I'd like to see Maxon. I don't know how you do it. I'd like to see them at least address the community on this issue and talk about what their plans are for the future to make sure there's new 3D talent coming to their platform. And that means more learning material on YouTube, more cool stuff to share on social media, a larger presence for jobs in the market, right? You need people like coming into this industry who can fill entry-level positions and entry-level salaries who know this software. So I'd like to see where Maxon stands on this, but that's my 2 cents on price. Okay, so I think I'm going to wrap this up. I'm going on for a while here. It's a long time in coming. Again, I invite you to the Pixel Fondue Discord if you're a Cinema 4D user. We need some Cinema 4D blood over there to like help people, me included. I'm trying to learn this program, figure these things out, transition from Modo or other software into Cinema 4D. And it's a great community, and we'd love to have a Cinema 4D community that we can build and thrive over at the Pixel Fondue Discord. I'll start doing Cinema 4D content on Pixel Fondue now that I'm sort of getting my head around the program, and it's a lot of fun. It's really, especially the simulation stuff, it's a lot of fun. So yeah, I'm excited to start this journey, and I'd like to thank Jonas over at Maxon for doing some one-on-one training with me early on to sort of help me get my head around the program. And I'm probably going to be bombarding Jonas with a few questions as I sort of start bringing actual projects into Cinema 4D instead of just doing test projects while I've tried to get my head wrapped around this program. Okay, take care. Thanks for watching, and bye-bye.
Yum, yum.